Hi, everybody. Robin here at Toadstool Tarot. Welcome. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I rarely remember to say that. I'm hoping I don't get interrupted today. We had internet interruptions in the neighborhood this morning, and I got a message that they think they're mostly repaired, but they're not sure. So if we get cut off, you know what happened. My internet disappeared, but we will press on while we have activity here. Let me say hello to all that are here. Maryland's Tarot Take, SCB, Saskia Handley, Red Wing, and that's it for now. I'm not, it's funny, I'm not fully prepared today. I didn't do all my homework, so I don't know how long we're going to go. I often don't even know what I'm going to do come Saturday or have a topic until it seems like a day or so before and something comes to mind. And I did have an idea about comparing and contrasting different cards in different archetypes in the tarot deck. Now, I started off, I did pull the majors. I didn't pull the minors. I thought the minors might go too long and it would take a little more time and organizing. But I have the majors on a tray in front of me, and I often find that while two different cards don't mean the same thing, they do share elements or qualities that are similar or point in the same direction but have a slightly different quality. So I thought we might talk about that a little bit. And I wonder if you've noticed the same when you've done readings. I'm going to use the Rider-Waite-Smith because it's, just a standard common language to use when you're looking at images. And we'll see. Hello, Timmy or Timmy Raven. So for starters, we've got the Fool. Now, it's funny because the Fool to me is, sort of taking first steps or stepping out into the world. But that brings me to the World card, which also reminds me of sort of stepping out into the world. So there's qualities of both of these cards that feel very similar energy-wise to me. Hello, Anna. And they're both about movement and movement forward, which also brings in a third card, the Chariot, which is about movement and hopefully movement forward. But with the other cards, the Chariot, you could be moving straight ahead, or you could hang a left or take right. For me, it's kind of about direction. And I don't really think of the others that way, but they really are. There's nothing specific in the Fool about what direction one might take, other than do you proceed forward or do you stop before you go off that cliff? And we don't know if that cliff is a sheer drop or if it's just a step down to a slightly lower level. Or maybe there's a step up that we don't see quite outside the frame. We don't know. And the world is kind of the same way. It's like, we're three-dimensional beings. We can go in, various directions according to the laws of physics. And so there is a sort of, do we take a step back, a step forward, left or right? How do we proceed? Now, the difference maybe in the two is the beginning of a journey or the end of a journey, but often the world as the end of the journey is kind of coming full cycle and restarting the journey. So it's the beginning of a new journey. It's interesting too that the character in the world is nude, as if they've been stripped of all their worldly attachments. So that's something to think about, the fool being all dressed up and ready to go, ready to leave home, and, dropping your clothes along the way, making yourself more vulnerable, more open, embracing what the world has to offer. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, there are differences and there are similarities between that pair, and I think that those are things to think about, subtle differences when you do readings. So when you're dealing with that idea of movement and evolution, you might want to think about those 3 cards, or if you get one of the cards there, you might think about the others as an alternative and what makes the card you're looking at distinctively different from the others, what maybe more subtle meanings it has in the symbols or in the reading that help you out. I'm going to move to the next card. This is tricky. You might help me. You might have a suggestion. I didn't find in the major arcana another card that for me feels like the Magician, because the Magician feels to me like an action card where they're manifesting something, they're making something happen. In that regard, I suppose every card in the major arcana is a magician, because they're all manifesting movement or action, moving forward. But I don't really think of it in terms of a following card for doing that sort of thing. Next, we have the High Priestess. Now, I get several cards here. The High Priestess I often think of in relation to the Hierophant, and maybe it's because they're both between these pairs of pillars. They're positioned, seated in a place where they receive people to come and listen to them, share their advice. The High Priestess, though, gathers her advice from going within and from studying and reading. And the Hierophant does it from training and tradition and schooling and worlds of raw rules and laws and regulations, that kind of thing. So there are some similarities and some differences there. Of course, then I also often relate the High Priestess with the Hermit card, because the Hermit card goes inward in search of things in the same way that the High Priestess does. Maybe he doesn't refer as much to esoteric knowledge, like she studies books and scrolls and esoteric symbols and things, whereas he's kind of reconsidering his nature and his mode of behavior, which actually kind of makes me think a little bit of the Judgment card. Where's that? Judgment. So both of these are very kind of reflecting on where you've been, where you're going, what you've done, what you need to do next. So there's a connection kind of between these two cards. Um, yeah, I got a new T-shirt. I discovered these. I got one of my significator, the Three of Wands, and first I found the Fool on Amazon. I just did a search, tarot T-shirt or tarot card T-shirts, I think, and realized it wasn't just like a handful. If you search for the tarot card that you particularly like, along with T-shirt, I think every one in the deck is available. So that might be something you like. Um, so the next card is the Empress. Now, I don't see it so much in this deck, but in my own deck, I often confuse the poses of the Empress and the Strength card, the way I've depicted them. And they both have a certain quality to them. The Empress is sort of seated comfortably, but in command. She's sort of like has strength or authority or power over the natural state of things or the wild things. And the Strength card seems very similar. So somebody with exerting their gentle authority and their position over this wild beast, this lion. So and also there's something for me about the Strength card that is supportive and sort of smacks of perseverance. And so I think of both of those cards in that way. Both of them feel very strong, but persevering and constant endurance applied to an action taken, to keep at it, kind of. The Emperor, I don't really have a pairing for an Emperor. Politically speaking, you might compare him maybe to a magician because he can manifest things by sheer authority, not so much by his skills or tools, but he's in a position that he can do that. He also has that quality of the Empress in terms of seated on a throne or a position of power. And also there's a little bit of the Justice card in there because he's sort of the decision maker, the head of the government. So there's that kind of similarity. Let's see. This one's a bit of a stretch. We have the Lovers, and the Lovers are kind of alone in the major arcana. They do remind me a lot of the Two of Cups in the minor. Oh, hi, M.A. The Lovers actually visually are very much like the Devil. But for me, I think the Devil card only sort of relates to the Lovers card in terms of sexuality, sexual attraction, temptation, perhaps a negative aspect of the Lovers, like a temptation to cheat, or let's see. All the things that maybe you strive not to do in a marriage or a relationship are in the Devil, as opposed to faithfulness and honoring one another in the Lovers card. So there's that kind of similarity, but contrast, I'd say, might be more of a contrast than a similarity. Visually, it's kind of interesting, though, that they have the same characters in them. And then there are two winged characters above. One is the angel above, and the other is the devil below. So it's sort of like higher nature, lower nature, earthly desires from two different angles, I guess. I'm running out of cards almost. Okay, let's go here. I have the Hanged Man. Now, this is a little bit tricky too, because when I see the Hanged Man, I usually think of a pause. You're doing something and you're told to stop, and then you consider new perspectives before continuing on. That could relate also to the Chariot, as it's kind of paused. It doesn't seem to be in motion when we look at it. It often looks like a concrete chariot that's very heavy or unmovable. The sphinxes of the horses drawing the chariot tend to have some conflict over which direction they want to move in, if they even want to move at all. They're usually lying down or pulling in opposite directions. But this is kind of pause or stop. And that reminds me of death, which also can be stop what you're doing. But the hangman is more of a brief pause to consider and then move on. The death card is kind of a stop completely and change, be open to changes, or changes are being made, which also is very much like the Tower card. So death card is sort of a transformation and a transition and change, which almost feels less abrupt than the Tower. The Tower is sort of unexpected change or destruction. Now, death can be unexpected, but also sometimes we can see it coming. We can see changes coming that have to be made. Whereas in the Tower, we usually don't see those. They usually take us by surprise. Or sometimes we need to make a change. If we have, if our foundation feels like it's stagnating, we need to consider giving it a good shake-up and forcing a change. Have you ever gone against what the cards have told you? I don't think so. I kind of give the cards my own sort of shake. If they don't seem to be telling me what I feel like the spread is telling me, then I look deeper and see, what am I missing? What symbol am I not recognizing? Or is there a different way to read that card that makes more sense in the context of the query and the spread? So usually it reads pretty well for me. Now, I know a lot of people pull single cards to work from, and I don't feel like there's enough information in one single card. As you can see, many of them have differing keywords and meanings, and they change a lot depending on the situation. And I don't feel like you get enough of a context with a single card in answer to a question. And I don't use reversals. That reversals will give you a little bit more context, but I use positions and spreads and support by other cards in order to get a better handle on what the context is surrounding the energy in the question. So I really do rely pretty much on 3-card spreads, and sometimes it takes more. A lot of times I find when I do a 3-card spread, I get a general overview of the situation. It's sort of like a snapshot of the situation, but not really a resolution or a suggestion in terms of a direction to take. So then I just start pulling additional cards to see, well, if we follow this progression, what might happen next? Or is there another card coming down the pike that will lead us in the direction we hope to go, or one that we need to look out for that we don't want to go? And sometimes it'll be right away. You'll get a solution on the fourth card. Sometimes you'll read, pull 4 or 5 cards and you'll see it, but you'll know that that card is quite distant from what you're going through at the moment. So it will take some processing or some time to resolve your issue. Sorry, backing up a little bit. Timmy. Raven, I use the major arcana to choose the appropriate duality that addresses the querent's question. This process actually forces the querent to more completely refine their question. Okay. Now, I don't like to do readings online because if you can do it with people in a chat, but there's a definite delay in the back and forth response. And I feel like tarot reading is an interactive thing. It's not just me and the cards seeing what I see and pulling stuff for you. It helps to get more background information. Sometimes the question wasn't stated quite accurately or is coming from a different place. They may be wanting to know something, not exactly what they asked. Their motivation behind asking the question is actually different than the reader's picking up on. And sometimes it really helps to get that extra information. I find a 3-card pull is my minimum. Now I know a lot of people love the Celtic Cross. For me, that's too much information, and it's a very distinctive thing. It's more really, it's its own kind of framework. It's not really about answering the question directly. It's kind of a life overview in a way, or expanding the nature of the question to include other aspects and direction. I never use the Celtic Cross. It feels like there's too much stuff there. And sometimes the more cards you have, the more distracting it is. I just have found that 3 cards or 5 cards, sometimes I'll do 5. I don't know why. I rarely do 4. 4 usually is like the 4th card is an addition to the 3. Like if the 3 doesn't feel satisfying, I'll pull a 4th card, and usually that will solve or resolve things. But I often I'll do 3 cards, I'll do 5 cards. An odd number of cards seems to me somehow to help. I often read from the center out. I often use the center card as the question at hand or the person at hand. They are the center of their own world, and the cards around them are the energy or factors surrounding that. So everything kind of radiates out and sort of moves outwards, looking at those other cards, or you get those influences, the outside cards kind of pushing inward on that center card. So it's like if you're affected by things around you, you can kind of gauge the effect by what the cards are, where they're coming from, and how they're influencing you. Or if it's you having to take the energy and move outwards, you get kind of 2 choices or 2 aspects of something to deal with in moving forward. I draw separately from the major, minor, and numbers. I think each type address different parts of the query. 1 card is not enough. I agree. I pull anywhere from 3 to 9, depending on the situation. I'm a little bit stuck in my ways on that. I'll do 3 cards, or 3 and a supplement, like 4, or I'll do 5 cards. 5 cards is a nice thing. If you have a question that feels like it needs more information than the 3, I'll go to 5. And also, if I'm doing a time related thing, when I think about 5, I think about the weekdays, Monday through Friday, which is the better part of the week. So it's kind of like, if part of your question has to do with, what's coming and what's happening in the coming week, even though I don't do prediction, I think of tarot reading as probabilities or possibilities rather than eventualities, because we do have free will. So I'll look at the cards and I'll think, okay, what is likely to happen, or what is possible to happen? What are the trends that seem to be on the path ahead for me this week over the course of the next 5 days or so? And I do get a general idea of how to maybe modify my behavior to best achieve what I want to. Like sometimes it would get a lot of introspective cards or slow down cards, take the week slow, really think about your actions. Sometimes we get cards that are very action oriented, and sometimes they're oriented actions in different ways that seem conflicting, that you need to work on or work out to figure out. Too much action can be distracting, and you need to make sure that you're clear on your focus if you're moving forward, how you're taking steps forward so that you can achieve what you want. Let's move on. Wheel of Fortune. I don't know. This card kind of stands on its own. I have trouble with this card, and often when I get this card, it feels like pointless to me, because it's a little bit like the roulette wheel. It's not even a roulette wheel. A real roulette wheel is black and red, so you have kind of a couple options there. You also have all the numbers and choices, but it's like you spin it and it's chance. It's chance decision, or the unknown, or the unknowable. So you have that aspect in the Wheel of Fortune. Actually, there is a little bit of that in the Moon card, because in the Moon card we have some manner of things we know and see, and then other aspects are a mystery. They're unknown. They're not yet revealed. We're going down the path. We have our natural impulses, our nature, our intuition, and then we have our reason side. So for me, that's the difference between the dog, the domestic dog, and the wild wolf following down the path. And sort of there's a bit of a balance, or an engagement, or an argument, a working together or a working against one another between common sense and a natural inclination to do something. And we don't usually have all the information. And in both of these cards, there's this nature, I think, or a tendency to not have all the information, and a feeling that you want to know more, you need to know more. It rarely feels like advice to me, though. Usually it just kind of feels like, well, I don't have what I need, and the card isn't giving it to me either. But maybe it's like a caution to proceed. Maybe it's like, well, take a little break. More information will be revealed as the wheel spins, or the wheel comes to a stop. You'll see where it lands and what information it's provided for you. The same way, if you're sorting out the difference between your intuition, your natural inclinations, or you've made a pro and con list and you're reasoning things out, how you're sorting through those choices in order to gain as much best information as you can to move forward. Let's see. Okay. Justice and judgment. Now, these used to confuse me. I read them anymore. Well, there's another one. Judgment, justice, and temperance relate a lot to me because justice is a balance of the scale. Temperance is kind of a balance between the flow of energy or the flow of elements between these two cups. Because they're cups, that feels more emotional. So there's sort of an emotional aspect to temperance that justice doesn't have. Justice has a sword in it, so it's more of a mental communication kind of thing about being fair and equitable. In terms of decision making, both of them can have to do with decision making and blending these elements. These, also could relate to that moon card, that dual aspect of your nature versus your reason, in trying to sort out the information you need to make a decision. Now, I used to confuse the justice card a little bit with judgment, but what I look at now, justice is sort of feels to me like now in the moment. I'm measuring things out, I'm balancing things, I'm trying to do right, and I'm making a decision in the here and now to move forward. Whereas judgment for me is a reflection card. It's like the future of justice. It's like when you get to the judgment card, it's like, that's a decision you made. You sealed your fate in a way. You are pausing now to reflect on the decisions that you've made and how they are currently affecting you. But it's not like if you're making a new decision based on that, it's like learning from your past so as not to repeat your mistakes so you can move forward. So it's not really the same thing as the justice card because you've already had this kind of learning experience. You know whether the decision you made was just or not, whether it was fair, whether it was equitable, whether it felt right or wrong. You can pause to reflect on that and then decide where to go from there. Sorry, I haven't been following the chat. Let me scroll ahead here. And I've yet to buy cards. Do you know, is there a certain deck to get, or do I buy what calls to me? I'd say buy two. Buy what calls to you. But in order to learn what calls to you, even if you don't like the qualities of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, there are a million versions of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Buy one with Pixie's art because it's sort of like the Rosetta Stone of contemporary tarot. And they're basically three. There's the Thoth, there's the Tarot de Marseille, and there's the Rider-Waite-Smith. But the bulk of decks out there were derived from the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's sort of arguably commonly acknowledged as a sort of a common denominator in tarot and easiest to follow and understand and learn and interpret. And any deck that you follow, it will be helpful to learn that deck based on having a base on the Rider-Waite-Smith system. So that would be my personal recommendation, Anna. Another thing, if you're buying a new deck, the little white book that usually comes with a deck is rarely helpful. Some decks, the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith one by Arthur Waite was so confusing. The first half a dozen times I picked up a tarot, I was so frustrated. I put it down, thought, I'll never learn this. And at some point, I had to cast it aside. It's got keywords in it, but the keywords are confusing. And I didn't realize, because when I first looked at them, it's like, wait a minute, these words don't mean the same thing. It's like some are synonyms and some are antonyms. But when you read cards aren't always the same thing either. They have different contexts. So I think that's something not particularly well explained in the little white books, are that depending which keyword you use, depends on the query and the context. And that's a little bit harder to learn. And I think that just sort of comes from experience. But there are much thicker, better books for you to buy, to study from, or follow YouTube channels that talk about readings and discuss things. And I love it particularly on a YouTube channel when you have people reading together and they add to each other's readings, like, oh, it's interesting that you saw that card or that series of cards that way, because these symbols jumped out at me and I see it this way. But there is a congruence there between our two visions of it. And I find that some people say there's no wrong or right way to read tarot. And I think that's sort of true, particularly if you're reading for yourself. Somebody might argue with you if you're doing readings you're charging for, you're reading for other people. But there are many ways to use tarot. I use them as a guidance system and for self-introspection. And in that way, in that regard, you're not hurting or harming, and you don't have the potential to hurt or harm anyone but yourself if you're reading for yourself. And it's really just confronting you with questions to ask yourself. It's like if you're concerned over an issue and you get a card that hints at something that you hadn't thought about or a different perspective, it's a good way to pause and think about that, and sometimes even journal or write it down to kind of work out your problems. So I know it's not typically something that people use in the academia of therapy, but it can be therapeutic. And I almost wish that more people in the social sciences did incorporate tarot as a visual tool to unlock things unconsidered or go deeper. I mean, some might refer to that as a shadow reading. Things that you hadn't considered or aspects of your personality or action that you tend to overlook, and the tarot will often sort of help you go deeper. Agreed, conversation between reader and querent is half of the task. 5 cards is usually my maximum, says Saskia. Hello, nothing so strange. Welcome. I was going to ask, I thought odd numbers, much thanks. Well, you can it depends on how you work. Oh, what I was going to say is, in terms of no wrong way to read, what I find is if you're reading and you're getting consistent results, go with the way you're doing it. If you're not getting consistent results and it seems haphazard or random every time, I don't think you've reached the method for you yet. And you might want to go a traditional route if that's the case. But I think that like anything else, the more you practice, the more you use tarot, the more you learn. And the wonderful thing about tarot is it's not like you learn it and you're done. It's forever unfolding and forever opening up new possibilities and new ideas that just increase and deepen your knowledge of how to use or how to work the system. When I started out early on and I finally felt confident enough to read, my readings were so surface level that a 3-card reading, I would get a quick overview, like a comic strip versus a novel. And I could do a reading for someone in, 15, 30 seconds. Nowadays, when I look at 3 cards, I spend a lot more time. I find myself drawn deeper into the symbols and to the directionality of the characters in the card, or one of them's pointing to some symbol in another card or something. There's a lot of subtleties in there, and you can go as surface and shallow as you want or as deep as you want. Balance radiates from the center. Oh, we were talking about even numbers. I feel like the odd numbers, it's sort of like, it is a little like the justice scales on a fulcrum, and we live at the center of our own universes. not not in an egocentric manner, but it's like everything that happens that we consider, it happens outside of ourselves and around ourselves. So in that regard, we're the center of our own mode of operation, our own activity, our own way of working. And so all the things around us affect us, or those are the choices or options, things that we have to deal with. That's why I love an odd number of cards, and why I work from the center out. Now, sometimes I do work left to right as if I'm reading. Some people consider 3-card readings as past, present, future, and sometimes I do that. But I have a peculiar notion about the physics of time. And it seems like there are other people that agree that time is not what we think, that it's a man-made invention and it doesn't necessarily move forward, that this is a weird Alice in Wonderland concept, the idea that there's no future, there's no past in time, that it's, it's energy all around us, and there's no such thing. Time is sort of how we measure out our lives from beginning to end. The cells multiply and grow and decay as we are born and grow older and die. So we've kind of developed or invented time as a way to measure our existence. But as we're discovering more things like past lives, future lives, life beyond death, things like that, it's a sort of an odd, arbitrary thing, and it's a very small piece of something. It feels like a lot. Like, if you live a long life, you're lucky to live into your 90s or up to 100. That's a pretty long life. I'm finding in my 70s now that the older I get, the faster time seems to go. Like when I was a little kid, it's like the day was so long, and I'd be sitting in class in school and seeing the clock on the wall. It's, oh my God, well, 3 o'clock never come, so we're out of school. But now, I'm retired. I got too much time on my hands, and yet it just zips by. It's not even the matter, like when I was working, the work day sometimes would go by very slowly, but the weeks seem to go by quickly. And now it's more and more that way. It's like I've even lost track of the weekends, retired. It's like there's 7 days in a week, but I often don't know where I am in the placement of the week. And it all just flies by. It's, mostly it's measured from morning to night. For me, it's dark and light as opposed to what day it happens to be. I often can't tell what day it is. So it's interesting how we measure time. But like I said, when I use a 3-card spread, it's not always past, present, future, moving forward. Sometimes they flip around like a mirror. Like sometimes the future is reflected in the card in the past position, and vice versa. Or maybe both cards outside of us are our whole positioning in time. So you have to kind of come to your own feeling about that. And I'll tell you, I mentioned this before, a film that I saw that burst wide open my ideas about reading tarot is this film called Tarology. It's about an artist and a card reader named Enrique Enriquez, who some of his theories and ideas are so out there, it's like, I haven't got a clue what he's talking about. But he kind of developed what I call open readings. Now, I don't think he's the first one that did it, but he made me approach the cards in a much less strict manner and looking at the images in relation to one another and what they're doing. So it's like, in a way, it makes it much easier to read cards that way when you You have to keep in mind the question, so you have a context there, the personality involved, but also what's going on, what is taking place in the cards visually, which is why I love the Rider-Waite-Smith system, because it's scenic images of actions taking place. It's 78 versions of people doing different things in different ways. And it's just really helpful, I find, and much easier to read that than, say, a Tarot de Marseille, which is clusters of numbers and often requires relating to it in a numerological way, which for me is another system. So I don't really enjoy or appreciate that so much, and I don't fully understand it. The cards are a good focus for meditation. That relates to therapy, I think. Self-introspection. Yeah, some people meditate on the cards before they sleep. To me, the Wheel of Fortune is the physical side of the duality of the world of work. Hermit is intellectual work. The world of work. Okay. You mean as opposed to going to a job and using your mind that way, sort of like your coffee break or your lunch break or your time at home between work days, kind of in your head thinking about a slow down way to approach the things you have to approach, maybe. I have fibromyalgia, so my mind gets blurry, just so you all know. Well, that's one of the nice things about tarot, is there's no time frame or pressure on it. I find if maybe you like to drink coffee or tea, make yourself a cup and sit down and put a spread out in front of you and just relax. Daydream a little bit into the cards. Don't work your brain so hard. Find as comfortable a position as you can to almost blur out your common sense and reasoning and just look at the cards. And sometimes the images, their symbols float forward. Sometimes they almost read themselves. And what I love to read at cafes, for me, probably my favorite thing to do, and I'm not like an utter cafe fanatic, or coffee fanatic, I should say. But I like to go to a cafe with several decks. I'll put down a reading cloth to keep them, safe from coffee, liquids, or, material on the table. Keep my cards clean and dry. I'll lay out a spread, and then I'll, sometimes I won't even look at them right away. I'll pick up my cup of coffee or tea and have a little sip, gaze out the window, do a little people watching, and then I'll drift back to the images, and it's almost read it like a mural. Or a film strip. What's taking place in the cards? What's happening? Sometimes you look at just a little and you're not sure, and then you go daydream again or look out the window. Sometimes you'll see something mirrored in street activity or other activity in the cafe that helps you understand or find your way in the cards. Like, oh, isn't that kismet? There's an example right there of what the cards might be trying to show me. I like the moon card. I find it's open to possibility. I have a lot of trouble with the moon card because, again, it's one of those ones that I don't fully understand yet. The sun card always feels easy to me. It's sort of like revelation, it's happiness, it's illumination. The star and the moon cards are a little more problematic to me. The star card, I don't quite understand this distribution of liquids here. Sometimes it feels wasteful, sometimes it feels nurturing, but aside from the figure in the card and the what she's doing, pardon me, my first way to understand the star card was in thinking, what does a star mean? Well, somebody said, oh, when you wish upon a star or you make a wish on a star, there's hope. The star card keyword is hope. I don't quite look at it that way. That is one keyword. You need to find your own keywords. For me, the star card is about direction at this stage. Now, maybe as I consider more this figure and what they're doing, I may find a better explanation that works for me. But what I think of when I see the star card is I think of sea travel in history, when men were out at sea in ships and you couldn't see the horizon. You didn't know where you were, particularly at night. In the day, you had a sense of, if you knew what time of day it was, where was east and where was west, but because of the sun. But the night, you couldn't tell unless you knew the position of the stars, and they use the stars as maps to guide. So I often think of the star card as guidance, and in some ways relating to the Chariot in terms of you need to find guidance in order to know the direction you want to move in. To reach your goal, you need to be going in the right direction. So that's similar to the Chariot. Yeah, and I was going somewhere else, but my mind went off train of thought went off the track. I looked, still no brains for sale. What? On Amazon, only marbles. I got them. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure. Amazon might be your only choice. I wouldn't say that that's your best choice for shopping. Might be a good choice for saving money. But in terms of exposure to cards, there's nothing quite like an esoteric or metaphysical shop to wander through, where you can see many decks, and some of them almost jump off the shelf at you, or like you're really drawn to or attracted to. Like if you go to a museum and you see a whole array of paintings, some of them draw your attention and others it's like, I don't get that, or I can't relate to that, and you move on. Tarot is kind of similar because they are kind of little galleries in a box. They're a pack of 78 art images, and the images are symbolic, but you can appreciate them just as paintings, as artwork. And you don't get any further than that. You haven't spent a whole lot of money to have a gallery in a box, just to kind of daydream over and, thumb through the cards for a while. And I also say that a deck of tarot cards is like an endless book, a book that has 78 pages, but since they're not bound and they're shuffled, you get a million stories from a deck of cards, whereas you get one story in a particular sequence from a bound book. With the tarot, depending on how many cards you pull and how they've been shuffled, you get constantly new inventions of new stories. And here's something you can try too: is if you're a sort of a seasoned tarot reader, you might want to start just with the major arcana, but you can do it with a whole deck. Start reading the deck randomly shuffled as a story, like this happens and then this happened. Well, what took place between this and this, or what led to this direction? And it's sort of like creating your own novel, going through the cards one at a time for a sitting session. Now, you talk about complex spreads. It's not exactly a spread, but it's kind of similar in that you're moving from one card to the next as you're unfolding a story. So that can be a fun experiment to try. Know exactly what you mean, Marilyn. It's the most frustrating thing. I give you my spoons. We're all a little flaky. I like this temperance versus justice comparison. I think that's why most of us are here. We tribe. L. Phillips, hello. Especially my family still doesn't understand. Friends disappear. Life is never the same. I'm not sure if that's due to the fibromyalgia or if it's due to the tarot reading. Tarot reading can put people at odds with friends and family. I think it's something you want to do solo or start out solo, and then you find your tribe. You find people that support you. You find people interested in having discussions over tarot. And maybe you don't even frame it as a reading. Maybe you just sit down with a friend and some cards and say, oh, here, let's just use these images as prompts for our conversation and see where it goes. And that can open some really interesting dialogues. Hey, Chris, welcome. I don't see you here often. Let's see. Thoth is way too much work for me. I have a little bit of trouble with the Thoth. Well, it's very different looking cards. They're very abstract. So it's not as easy to see physical beings doing physical things because not all the cards depict that, and some are more abstract. And it's beautiful colors and beautiful art, but it's much more abstract. Also, I have difficulty in the renaming and reassignment of some of the cards. The court cards have, they don't have pages. I think they have princesses, but I'm never quite sure what sequence. You have a prince, princess, a knight, and a queen, I think. I don't think there are any kings. I'm not sure. So I don't know who's at the top of the hierarchy. Is it the knight or is it the queen? I don't know. It just kind of messes with my head in terms of approaching the system. So the Rider-Waite-Smith system is much easier for me. It's outmoded and outdated because it's sort of derived on a medieval representation of hierarchy in government, page, knight, queen, king, which we don't use mostly anymore. And also ace through 10, there's a numbering system. But often when you're reading tarot, you don't even look at the numbers. You just look at what's happening in the pictures. Now, Enrique, when he reads with Marseille cards, and often looks at the numbering system, these clusters of symbols, as increase or decrease. You know, are they moving upwards, evolving, becoming more crowded? Are they diminishing? What is the energy there? Is it increasing or diminishing, decaying or growing? Those are things that you can look at, but I prefer not to use Marseille so much. MA, I did the same thing. The weight book that come up with my deck made me give up. Temporarily lucky. Yeah, I tried the Little White Book about 5 or 6 times and thought, I'll never learn how to read tarot. And then I look back again, and there's, I think, a little essay or something in the beginning, very, very brief, talking about the history of tarot. And there's one key line that everything hangs on that I think attributed to Waite says, the key to tarot, or the most important thing about tarot is it's all in the pictures, or it's all in the symbols, something along that line. So if you just embrace that, the pictures and the symbols, and you don't take to heart the physical key words that they throw at you in the Little White Book, I think you're better off and you'll find your way a little easier. SCB, yes, my first deck was all flowers. I got so lost. Well, that's why I suggested for wanting to, Anna who wanted to buy her first deck, buy two. But focus, you may find yourself finding a perfectly pretty deck that you can't read because the system's confusing or is different. If you buy the RWS as well, then when you get frustrated by the pretty deck that you like, you can build a foundation reading the RWS and then find your way back to the more abstract deck, and it should help you to understand or learn it a little bit easier. SCB, I feel you need the basics, but I mainly use intuitive reading now. Yeah, I think that a lot of people do, and I think that's why a lot of people like the Rider-Waite-Smith system, because it often lends itself to intuition. And sometimes the images don't feel like they you can get a Rider-Waite-Smith clone which sticks to the system, but the imagery can be very different than the typical deck. And you might look at them, the cards side by side, and say, wait a minute, these don't mean the same thing. But usually there is some kind of a common connection between the two. If you look long enough, it's like, oh, I see, they're approaching it from this angle. It's a little less direct, a little more oblique, but it adds an extra dimension or perspective on what you're looking at than you might have had just going with the RWS. The tarot, to me, is a tool that removes filters that disconnect me from my root intellect. Okay. Wow, guys, I'm so happy that you joined me today, and I thought I'll never make an hour with this discussion, but we did. In fact, we're over now, so I should go because don't know if Simon's on today, but if he is, he will have started already. So I'm going to let you all go. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this week, and I'll look for you next time. Bye.